In the grim darkness of the far future, there exists a brotherhood born in shadow, and their name is the Raven Guard, also known as the 19th of the Emperor's original legions, and their tale is not one of merely surviving, but of sacrifice, secrecy, and scars that run deeper than mere flesh. Their Primarch, the legendary Corvus Corax, was discovered upon Lycrus, a bleak moon that once orbited the industrial hive world of Kavahara. When the Emperor reclaimed him, the moon would be summarily renamed to Deliverance, a title heavy with irony, for though it was freed from oppression, Deliverance would forever be haunted by the weight of unending tragedy. The Raven Guard became masters of guerrilla warfare, with tactics that were a blend of surgical precision and silent devastation. They were to be the unseen hand of the Emperor's wrath, slipping behind the enemy's lines, striking with calculated violence and vanishing before retaliation could come. But their story darkened with the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, a civil war that shattered the Imperium and left the Raven Guard devastated, as their survival was owed only to desperate measures and no small amount of determination. Yet even victory would bring them no peace, as in the centuries that followed the Horus Heresy, a degradation of their legion's gene seed began to surface. Slow was the unraveling of what made them superhuman, as certain organs vital to the physiology of a space marine began to fail. The mucranoid and the Belcher's gland ceased to function entirely, while the melchromatic organ mutated, bleaching their skin a deathly white and turning their hair and eyes black as night. The cause of this is highly debated, but many believe it traces back to Corvus Corax himself and his tragic attempt to accelerate the creation of new Astartes after the Isstvan V atrocity. His experiments, which would be tainted by the Alpha Legion, produced horrors that could never be undone. And now, by M32, this genetic decay deepened to a point that it was nigh irreversible, as the Raven Guard's gene seed degradation grew more severe, to the point that some organs were rejected entirely. To sustain their chapter, they turned once more to the gene stock of Terra, and though this reliance slowed recruitment and stretched their resources insanely thin, they still fought on, silent and unyielding, and then there would come the Sable Brand. From the Legion's earliest days, a shadow of madness haunted particular sons of Corax, a cold, all-consuming battle fury, paired with a haunting delusion, the inability to distinguish the whispers of the dead from the voices of the living, a veritable schizophrenic episode. Their eyes would turn completely black, as their pupil would cover the entirety of their sclera, as though the darkness within the Raven Guard had surfaced for all to see. Some scholars claim that even Corax himself bore this affliction, and during the Great Crusade, those so afflicted were formed into a unit known as the Shadow Killers, used sparingly and with grim purpose, often being left to die on the battlefield after their deed was done. But after the near extinction at Isstvan V, such expendable deployment was no longer possible. And so, not only were the living Space Marines reintegrated back into the chapter, but their gene seed, which was likely heavily mutated and damaged due to the defect, was used and propagated throughout the entirety of the bloodline. In response, Corax sought control through discipline and doctrine. He forged the trifold path of shadow, a meditative code meant to restrain the madness of the Sable Brand. And while it lessened the frequency of outbreaks, it could not eliminate them entirely. Those who succumb would not die in battle, not anymore. They were too valuable, but rather they would be confined within the Ravenspire, the chapter's very own fortress monastery, where apothecaries would work in secrecy and study in a manner almost verbatim like the Blood Angels, with desire to cure their cursed gene seed. To this day, these experiments remain largely shrouded in both secrecy and silence, as the Masters of Shadow would have none outside the chapter know of it. Whether it be mercy, duty, or desperation that drives them, none can say. But one truth endures: the Raven Guard, even in the light of victory, will never exit the shadow of Corax. In the centuries following their near extinction at Isstvan V, the Raven Guard would refine how war itself was fought, turning it into an art form of undeniable precision and unknown deception, unlike their more zealous kin such as the Blood Angels, who favor glorious charges and full frontal assaults, along with glorious melee combat, the sons of Corvus Corax embrace more cold and calculated dimensions of warfare. They do not seek to overwhelm, they seek to unmake. Their approach to battle is rooted in striking where the enemy is weakest, with lightning assaults on vital positions, executed with surgical efficiency. They favor no grandiose displays, no glorious charges, completely ignoring the ABCs of combat, but rather only results, as the Raven Guard view war as a tool of liberation and annihilation in equal measure. Scouts are indispensable in their operation, acting as the Legion's unseen eyes, identifying enemy concentrations, rally points, and suitable landing zones for rapid, undetected descents. Once these targets are marked, vanguard formations descend from the skies, cutting the heart from their enemies before they even realize the battle has begun. Assault squads are often seen at the forefront of such engagements, equipped with jump packs to strike swiftly and disengage before retaliation is even possible. These strike forces sow confusion amongst the enemy's ranks, hitting fast and fading into the void, as tactical squads in turn deploy via Thunderhawks and drop pods, reinforcing the assault with disciplined volleys of sustained fire before vanishing back into the shadows of their own making. Commanders of the Raven Guard often favor using lightning claws, weapons that embody Corax's version of speed and precision. Their command cadres mirror this aesthetic, as they all wear black armor whose claws flash like streaks of lightning, descending upon their foes with a terrifying grace. But beyond these tactics and weaponry lies a philosophy that binds them together, the trifold path of shadow. Conceived by Corax himself, the path is represented by a three-bladed symbol. Sometimes it is in the shape of a trident, other times it is denoted by a triple tined claw, as each blade represents a singular principle: ambush, stealth, and vigilance. Corax taught that mastery of one of these ensured the possibility of victory. Mastery of two made their triumph likely, but command of all three rendered the enemy's defeat inevitable. This doctrine shapes the chapter's very structure, as companies 3 through 5 each specialize in one of these three paths, serving as both a training ground and instruments of war. Only those who master their path may ascend to the second company, a rank reserved for those closest to Corax's ideals. Many never reach it, as countless battle brothers live and die within their specialized companies, unmatched in their own discipline, yet forever chasing the impossible balance of all three. The chapter's warcraft extends beyond mere philosophy. It defines their arsenal, as the Raven Guard rarely field heavy tanks or land raiders, heavily favoring their resilience on stealth, meaning such machines are functionally a hindrance rather than an asset. Instead, they favor land speeders and gunships, platforms that complement their mobility and precision strikes, while maintaining an air of stealth. Their independence too sets them apart, as Raven Guard captains are allowed to operate with a remarkable amount of autonomy, commanding their companies as self-contained strike forces. It is rare for an entire chapter to ever take the field at once, even rarer than many of the other chapters descended from legions than any of the other chapters. They are more often to be found lending their aid across the galaxy, often without awaiting orders or sanctions from their chapter master. Some Imperial commanders have viewed this independence as an instability, yet others recognize it as a testament to their discipline and a trust forged in the proving grounds of their shadowed warfare. And yet, even with such control lies an awareness of fragility, as every member of the chapter understands that the chapter's very own gene seed is degrading. As it stands, the ever-present specter of the Sable brand ensures that apothecaries are needed to accompany any deployment. Over time, this necessity has led the Raven Guard into maintaining more apothecaries and helix adepts than nearly any other chapter in the Imperium. They are a brotherhood defined not by glory, but by purpose, silent predators who fight unseen wars for a dying Imperium. In every campaign, their methods whisper a truth learned long ago on Deliverance, that in the dark one must either become a shadow or be consumed by it. Through the long and haunted history of the Raven Guard, few tales inspire such unease amongst Imperial scholars as that of the Shadowmasters, known in the ancient tongue of Deliverance as Mordethian. Their existence was a secret buried so deeply within the Legion's ranks that even their own brothers who fought beside them, would never know who or what they truly were. More Deathian emerged during the Great Crusade, as their origins were tied to a genetic quirk found in certain sons of Deliverance. These Astartes carried with them a spark of the Primarch's own strange gift, the ability to shadow walk, to blur and vanish from sight as if the light itself refused to touch them. This was no artificial enhancement, but rather a mutation born of Corax's bloodline, expressed only in the rare few. Yet, to the wider Legion, these warriors did not exist. Officially, they would be referred to as test subjects in a project involving thermal technology, a field so volatile and so obscure that few dared question its purpose. Only Corvus Corax himself and a handful of trusted apothecaries knew the truth, that this secret cadre operated beyond the sight of the Imperium, and even beyond the awareness of their own brothers. They were assassins, saboteurs, veritable phantoms of war, deployed where silence and precision outweighed brute strength. Shadowmasters spoke in stock argot, a code of gestures and low-frequency murmurs incomprehensible to outsiders. Working alongside the Greater Legion, they executed flanking strikes, disrupted enemy communications, and dismantled war machines before a single shot could be fired. Records from the campaign on Constantic II detailed how they ambushed and annihilated entire columns of rogue Skitarii, crippling a rebel mechanicum force before it could even bring its weapons to bear. Few ever saw them in action. Fewer still survived to experience it. To witness a Shadowmaster at work was to see the art of war stripped of sound and mercy and replaced by a silence that could suffocate a soul. In the aftermath of the heresy, as the Imperium reeled from its wounds, the principles behind this coven of covert operators endured, evolving into what would become known as the Mortit Protocol. The Mortit Protocol was a doctrine of infiltration and subversion, a method by which individual Raven Guards were dropped behind enemy lines for extended periods of time, tasked not with survival but with the cultivation of a rebellion. They would train local resistance cells, rally loyalists, and ignite insurgents to undermine hostile regimes from within. In time, these fires of insurrection would grow until the Raven Guard's arrival became less of an invasion and more of an execution of an inevitability. Even now, the legacy of the Shadowmasters lingers within the chapter, a whisper of a dark method passed from master to apprentice beneath an oath-bound silence of deliverance. They are proof that the sons of Corax see victory not born of glory, but rather of patience, precision, and the art of vanishing before the dust has even settled. If the Raven Guard are defined by war fought in silence, then their culture is shaped by that very same silence, a reflection of the Primarch's somber heart. Within the wider Imperium, they are regarded as distant. Their manner is grim and withdrawn, as their preference for secrecy has earned them few allies amongst their brother chapters. Yet for all their austerity, the Sons of Deliverance have never forgotten their origins as liberators of the enslaved. Their bond with mortal men, especially those from their homeworld, remains one of mutual respect, forged in the fires of rebellion and maintained through the quiet reverence of their shared purpose. Amongst their traditions, few are as storied as the Contest of Shadows, a test of subtlety and endurance known only to the initiated. But deeper still lies the rituals that shape their very soul, and that of the chapter. The Rite of Shadows are amongst their oldest customs, a ceremony carried out in absolute silence, using a specialized form of sign language known as Corspeak in order to ask and answer questions. The rites teach that the shadow holds both truth and deception. To master one, you must discern the other. Through this purpose, an Astartes learns not only to see his enemies clearly, but also his brothers and himself. Those who complete the ritual earn the honorific of Shadow. The title itself grants no rank, no privilege, only respect. For within the Raven Guard, respect is earned through understanding what cannot be spoken. Another tradition, older still, is known as Corvia. Every initiate at some point during their training or as part of a meditative quest, must hunt one of the small black ravens native to the forest of Cadavar. The challenge itself is immense, as to catch one of these wary birds barehanded and to still its fluttering heart, all the while preserving their incredibly fragile skull as a totem. These corvida hang from a warrior's belt by fine, almost silvered chains, each skull a symbol of a personal honor and resolve being displayed fully for the chapter. And when a battle brother falls, his surviving comrades must recover his corvia and carry it into war, his memory and spirit now bound to theirs via this small totem, that is, until it can be returned to Deliverance and buried in the soil of their home. Even in death, the Raven Guard embrace a form of humanity. When possible, a fallen warrior's body is to be stripped of armor and insignia, his gene seed reclaimed for the chapter's future, but his remains must be left upon the battlefield, buried and protected, as an offering to the carrion birds who will circle above. To the Raven Guard, this is not a desecration, but rather returning to the cycle of shadow and sky, from which all things come. Their mastery of concealment extends beyond the spiritual. One of their most elusive disciplines is known as wraith slipping, a hybrid of mental focus and physical technique that allows a warrior to blend into his surroundings, even while clad in the heaviest of bulky power armor. It is no psychic feat, but rather a collection of hard-learned movements, breath control, and environmental awareness, all culminating in the ability to vanish in plain sight in a way that endures from the eons before Corax himself vanished. Supporting these silent arts is the language of Crowspeak, taught to every Raven Guard from the moment they don the armor. On the battlefield, Crowspeak replaces the need for speech or vox signals, allowing warriors to move and coordinate without revealing their position. Some gestures are tactical, others are deeply symbolic. Phrases like Crowfane, Beast of Feathers, and Empathy Chime, along with a solemn murder call, which is a sign of demanding vengeance for a fallen hero, all speak to the quiet poetry of their stoic exterior. Amongst all the chapter's companies, none employ Crowspeak with a greater mastery than the second, whose shadow captains are required to wield it with absolute precision. Even their organization reflects Corax's vision of autonomy and adaptability. During the Great Crusade, the Legion itself followed the imperial model of chapters, battalions, companies, and squads, though Corax favored granting independent command to lower officers. This flexibility was actually a legacy of the Terran recruits from the Xeric tribes, and allowed the Raven Guard commanders to act swiftly without waiting for further orders, a principle that not only saved what little they could during the atrocities at Isstvan V, but endures to this day. When Corax reconstructed his legion, he commissioned new technologies from Mars, vehicles designed not for glory and not for survivability, but rather stealth. The Whisper Cutter was an open-topped atmospheric flyer which could be deployed to carry 10 Space Marines into a war zone without sound, leaving no trace of its descent, and then other craft would follow. Stealth-optimized Shadowhawk, Thunderhawk variants, and the Darkwing Storm Eagle, each tailored to the Legion's methods of covert warfare. After the Dropsite Massacre, when the Legion was shattered almost beyond recognition, Corax reorganized what remained. He divided the surviving warriors into new designations, reflecting their roles. Tactical companies became Talons, assault companies became Falcons, and their aerial vehicle elements would be further referred to as Hawk. Later, the arrival of genetically enhanced Astartes, known as the Raptors, would expand its structure further, and would be a final legacy of Corax's desperate attempt to rebuild what had been lost and fight back the darkness that was encroaching upon them. Each of these traditions, from the rites of shadow to the carrying of the Corvida, speak the same manner of truth. The Raven Guard's greatest strength lies not in their numbers, nor in their military might, but rather in discipline, memory, and silence. In a galaxy defined by endless war, there remains a whisper between heartbeat and an unseen hand of vengeance and deliverance alike. These are the Raven Guard. In the long and storied records of the Imperium's history, few tales invoke the same reverence as that of the Raven Guard. Once known as the 19th Legion, they were one of the Emperor's first and finest creations, born from Terra itself and molded in the fires of the Unification War. Their emblem, a black raven, was no idle choice. Across countless human cultures, it had always been a harbinger of fate and a silent messenger of death. It was an omen that would come to embody the very legion that had adopted it. When the Great Crusade was called, the Raven Guard answered, not with roaring banners or a thunderous charge, but rather with the quiet certainty of hunters who struck only once and without mercy. Even before the discovery of their gene father, the warriors of the 19th Legion had mastered the art of patience, precision, and ambush. They learned to wait in silence, unseen, right until the moment that it was time to strike, an approach that would soon become legend. Their destiny changed when they were reunited with their Primarch Corvus Corax, the Deliverer, the Raven Lord. His presence transformed the Legion. Under his pale hand, warfare became poetry, swift, silent, and surgical. His warriors became masters of infiltration and sabotage, living embodiments of the shadows they so revered. Their doctrine of stealth and mobility would become a boon to intelligence gathering and the cornerstone of their campaign strategy. And under Corax, the 19th carved their name into the stars in the Great Crusade. Yet history remembers that even the most disciplined of hunters can fall victim to betrayal. On the blackened sands of Isstvan V, during the infamous Dropsite Massacre, the Raven Guard were nearly annihilated to a man. Betrayed by their own brothers, the Legion shattered, its strength broken, and its faith tested. But though they were reduced to almost ash, they would not fade. From the ruins of Isstvan, Corax and his surviving sons rose again, vowing to wage war from the darkness itself. Their homeworld, once known as Lycrus, would eventually be renamed Deliverance and became a symbol of their resilience. An airless moon orbiting the forged world of Kaidavar, Deliverance was no paradise, as its surface bore scars from endless labor. Its skies were blackened and silent. Yet it was here, in the hollowed and desolate places, that the Ravenspire was to be built, a fortress monastery of shadowed steel. Here, the Raven Guard would become known for their measured intellect and cold efficiency, as they would learn to strike not in anger, but in inevitability. Their tactics emphasize infiltration, precision, and sudden acts of violence. They prefer to end wars before the enemy can even realize that it has begun, and when close combat is inevitable and unavoidable, their assault marines descend like wraiths, lightning claws gleaming in the darkened shadows, ripping through the opposition with a surgical ferocity that few are known for. Amongst these shadowed warriors, few names are spoken with as much reverence and respect as Kavan Shrike, once commander of the 3rd Company, later chapter master of the Raven Guard, before abdicating his role to someone he believed was his better. Aton Shan. Shrike was known as the Master of Shadows, and he carried Corax's legacy as being a man who leads not from behind walls or banners, but rather from the front lines, with silence entwined by steel and blood. The Raven Guard's bloodline traces directly to Corax himself, his pale skin as white as polished bone, his eyes as black as the starless void. But theirs is a legacy of loss as much as it is of triumph, as the Horus Heresy left them crippled, unable to shape the war's ending, and the wound of that betrayal never truly healed. For 10,000 years, the Raven Guard fought as silent guardians of the Imperium, haunting the battlefield and picking off mankind's enemies, ever watchful, ever patient, evermore. To this day, they remain what they had always been, shadows of deliverance, harbingers of the Emperor's will, and hunters who strike from the dark, seen only when it is far too late to avoid suffering such a terrible fate. There are few tragedies in Imperial history as haunting as that of the Raven Guard during the Horus Heresy. Masters of infiltration, deception, and sudden decisive warfare, they could unmake an enemy force with a single precise strike, just as their Primarch Corvus Corax had taught them. Yet even the most patient of hunter eventually becomes the prey, and when the Horus Heresy erupted, the Raven Guard were amongst the first to be called to enact the Emperor's vengeance. They, alongside the Iron Hands and Salamanders, formed the vanguard of Loyalist strike forces at Isstvan V, a mission that would become defined as the opening tragedy of a bloody civil war. The plan was supposed to be simple, a swift, coordinated assault upon the traitor legions to crush the rebellion before it could spread out of control. But what awaited them was not a battle, rather it was a trap. The first wave descended upon the blackened sands of Isfahan only to discover that the second wave, their supposed reinforcements, had already turned traitor. Betrayed by their brothers, the loyal legions were caught between a hammer and an anvil, and what would follow would be a slaughter on an unimaginable scale. Within hours, tens of thousands of Astartes lay broken and buried beneath the traitors' guns. When the dust settled, the Raven Guard, once proud and numerous, were reduced to only a scant handful of survivors. Those who escaped fled into the shadows, retreating to their homeworld of deliverance, and it was there, amidst the hallowed caverns of the Moon's Fortress Monastery, that Corax confronted an impossible choice. His legion was dying. His warriors, his sons, had been butchered. If the Raven Guard were to survive, something drastic was to be done. For solar days and nights, uncounted, Corax secluded himself in the highest chambers of the Raven Spire, surrounded by ancient sealed archives. These were the Emperor's own genetic records, tomes so sacred and so dangerous that none but the Primarch could unlock them. Within these forbidden texts, Corax found a method to restore his legion's strength, but at a terrible cost: an accelerated gene seed replication process, attempting to grow new Space Marines at a pace unseen since the earliest days of the Unification Wars. What was meant to be salvation, however, would be quickly twisted into horror. The warnings inscribed in those ancient texts proved to be true. The accelerated transformation produced abominations, creatures that were Astartes in form only, their limbs distended, their muscles grotesquely overgrown, and their minds shattered beyond reason. There are no official records of these experiments, but fragmentary accounts remain. They speak of monstrous figures, drooling and deranged, hardened into battle-ready, grim-faced custodians of the Raven Guard. Some say they were unleashed against Corax's enemies in a desperate act of vengeance. Others claim that Corax ordered them destroyed, unable to bear the sorry sight of what he had created in his haste. In the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, the 19th Legion could only form a few successor chapters under the Codex Astartes. Amongst these were the Raptors, the Relievers, and the Black Guard, each bearing fragments of the Raven Guard's genetic legacy, perhaps traces of their legacy as well. But Corax himself was never the same. Racked with guilt from what he had done in the name of survival, the Raven Lord withdrew himself into further isolation. For a full standard year, he neither spoke nor emerged from his chambers within the Ravenspire. And when he finally did, those who saw him described a gaunt figure, pale, with a voice that was so heavy with remorse that it caused a sorrow to reverberate within their hearts. Without ceremony, he would depart deliverance, setting a course straight for the Eye of Terror. His final words, recorded by those who witnessed him leaving, were said as a quiet plead for forgiveness, nevermore. Corax vanished into the warp and was never seen from again. Some say he sought redemption. Others believe he went to atone in the only way he knew, by hunting the traitors where none else dared follow. Whatever the truth, the shadow of his choices still lingers. For the Raven Guard, it remains a lesson written in blood, that even light can cast a terrible shadow. In the records of the Imperium's history, few truths are more elusive than the Emperor's original vision for his creations. Across the Gulf of Millennia, scholars, archivists, and Imperial servants have speculated endlessly on whether each of the first founding legions was conceived with a purpose in mind, a role for the Emperor's grand design in humanity's domination over the stars. Evidence, though fragmentary, speaks with a striking consistency. The Imperial Fist served as the Emperor's unyielding Praetorians, stalwart guardians of his realm, bulwarks against rebellion. The Ultramarines seem to have been almost tailor-made to be resplendent, disciplined embodiments of the Emperor's ideal order of governance, his shining host of a civilization reborn. The Blood Angels seem to be a tempest of oblivion, sent to the worst war zone in order to carve out any resistance that would risk the continued existence of another legion. However, the 19th Legion, the legion that would one day bear the name of Raven Guard, fell for a far darker calling. They were his hidden hand, vengeful watchers in the dark, silent executioners of those who defied his truth. Long before they bore the Raven's sigil, the Proto-Legion drew its strength from techno-barbarians of old Earth, specifically from the fierce and cunning Zerk tribes of the Asitak Dustfield. These were warrior peoples who waged endless war against their neighbors and the sprawling Yosendic bloc. Their existence was defined by scarcity, survival, along with a mastery of ambush and precision. From them, the Emperor forged a weapon of uncanny subtlety, soldiers whose patience and precision made them perfect predators in the Unification Wars. Even in the earliest days of the 19th Legion, they displayed a defining characteristic of cunning, brutality, or would it be more apt to say brutal cunning. They did not march to war under thunderous spectacles like other legions. They did not charge as a ravenous inferno, consuming all which was set upon them. Instead, they infiltrated unseen, observed without detection, and when the moment called for it, they struck with a brutality unmatched, using a scalpel to achieve what others could not do with a chainsaw. One moment, their prey would believe itself secure, and the next, the Emperor's justice was already at their throat. Records from this era describe the Legion's uncanny ability to transform absolute stillness to sudden, decisive violence. Their enemies would only realize the truth when it was far too late to react. The unseen blade already drawn, the gun already pressed to their temple. There was a brief, bloody, and utterly effective way of war. Armies, once numbering in the thousands, found themselves leaderless in the span of a heartbeat. Their commanders executed simultaneously in the dark by an unseen set of killers. To those who witnessed the 19th Legion at their work, even in their earliest days, their wars were not fought in the open. That was clear, but rather their enemies faced a series of vanishings, as their men would be gone without trace, their supply lines cut, and their command centers left silenced. In the aftermath, when the imperial banners rose above the ruins, there was seldom a witness left to tell how the victory was won. But these warriors were not wanton butchers. The Emperor's emissaries often offered their foes a final mercy, a choice: kneel to the Emperor or perish. Many bent the knee and were spared. Those who refused were erased with methodical precision, their defiance extinguished before it could take root. As the Unification Wars drew to their close, the 19th Legion's records of conquest remained largely unwritten, hidden even in triumph. Where others sought glory, they sought result. Their victories were silent, and their deeds buried beneath layers of imperial secrecy. Even amongst the ranks of the Astartes, few understood how many worlds had been brought into compliance by shadows alone. Yet the root of these methods ran deeper still, as the Serric tribes, from whom the Legion had been first drawn, carried with them a brutal philosophy that a defeated enemy must never be allowed to rise again. Watchfulness was not a virtue to them, but rather it was a key method of survival. Their ancient customs demanded that the conquered foes be observed with perpetual vigilance, and any hint of rebellion be met with a total and complete annihilation. When this doctrine merged with the Emperor's gene-forged designs, it created something both disciplined and dreadful. The 19th Legion did not merely fight wars, they ended them before they began. Their cold, calculated patience became their greatest weapons, as their silence heralded a form of doom. In time, this temperament would become not only a defining feature of their methods, but of their very souls. Long before the ravens bore their wings, the 19th Legion learned to live in the dark, becoming the Emperor's unseen watchers, harbingers of a quiet death. And though one day history would remember them as the Raven Guard, their earliest legacy remains shrouded in that same silence, a silence that has endured across 10,000 years, whispering of the Emperor's hidden hand and the ghosts of battles that no living man ever saw.